Alright, normally I don't do this at the start of a show. Normally I don't talk about politics, to be fair. But I'm just watching the most hilarious shit ever. I give you the clip. Like, I wish politics is like this in the UK, but whatever. Right? You're just gonna indulge me, and then we'll get to politics live. There's not really shocking about politics live, to be fair. It's just watch this. It's fucking hilarious. It's a clip. Oh shit. Oops. Anyway, watch this. It's just, honestly, glorious is an understatement. Fucking love it. Just listen. It's only like 5 seconds long, so don't worry about it.
President of the United States has committed. But when we start talking about things that look like evidence, they want to act like they blind. They don't know what this is. These are our national secrets. Looks like in the shitter to me.
She is the Jackie Brown of the United States. I don't give a fuck what you think. You mightn't watch politics as much as I do, but that shit was fucking funny. Like, when I first seen that, I was dead. Like, I literally was crying on my floor. I was like, imagine British politics was that interesting. Instead of, like, your right honourable gentleman, blah, blah, blah. Like, she's defending Joe Biden, in case you don't know. Because this thing is trying to, like, hold a hearing on impeaching Joe Biden. Which is fucking stupid, clearly. But whatever. Republicans are fucking mental. Anywho. But she just goes, she's just ham. She's mad. Kinda don't agree with the end of it, but whatever. This bit though is fucking hilarious. I'll play it again, but I'll play it in full. Not the end because it's a bit weird. But this shit's funny. Like, I haven't stopped laughing since I've seen it. And yeah, I'm gonna play politics live eventually. And then tonight we'll be back for round 2. Because we all know questions and on tonight's Thursday. We fucking do. Anywho, let's just play this because it's fucking hilarious. It's made me actually smile today. Like, we've had 2 good news days today. Yesterday and today. And nobody said a peep. Donald Trump is broke. Well, he's not allowed to do anything in New York anymore. Not one mention on the BBC. Kind of ironic, because in the ocean a sucker's ass and he was president, but whatever. Horses for courses, I guess. It's the BBC. GB News. What the actual fuck went on there? Mental. I digress.
President of the United States has committed. But when we start talking about things that look like evidence, they want to act like they blind. They don't know what this is. These are our national secrets. Looks like in the shitter to me. This looks like more evidence of our national secrets, say on a stage at Mar-a-Lago. When we're talking about somebody that's committed high crimes, it's at least...
I love Jamie Raskin's fucking face. He's like, did she just literally say the word shitter? I don't know who this lady is. I only just met her today. Jasmine Croquette. Fuck, I'm a fan. Don't care. Like, anyone who has the balls to just say the word shitter, and like, I've never heard anyone swear in Congress. Not like that anyway. It's so funny. It just makes me laugh. Like, it's very rare anyone in Parliament. Like, Ian Blackwood called fucking Boris Johnson a liar, got kicked out the House of Commons. Bro, you never hear anyone swear in the House of Commons. That's just boring as fuck. This lady though, Jackie Brown, fucking love her. Like, that's why I like American politics, because it is mental. I love politicians who swear though. Don't know why. They just seem more fucking real than these fucking robotic twats that we have to listen to every day on the news round. Anyway, whatever.
Indictments, let's say 32 counts related to unauthorized retention of national security secrets, 7 counts related to obstructing the investigation, 3 false statements, 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States, falsifying business records, conspiracy to defraud the United States, 2 counts related to efforts to obstruct the vote certification proceedings, 1 count of conspiracy to violate civil rights, 23 counts related to forgery or false document statements, 8 counts related to soliciting, and I could go on because he's got 91 counts pending right now. But I will tell you what the president has been guilty.
Don't you love her? She's Jackie Brown. She's so mad. I just love her. It's just, if you've never seen Jackie Brown, you're missing out. But anyway, she's funny as fuck. I love her. Brilliant. You don't have to agree with her in terms of Democrat or Republican. But the fire she shows is fucking brilliant. Like, we need more of that in politicians, I think. You don't have to be an actual cunt, clearly, no. But in terms of, like, putting up basic shit, like, that's good. It's like, why is no one saying Suella Braverman is a fucking racist? Which she is. Just because you're black skinned doesn't mean that you're not a fucking racist, fucking power hungry fucking maniac. Have you ever heard of Robert Mugabe? Like, fuck, that guy was a fucking complete tool. Like, an utter piece of shit. He ruined Zimbabwe. And he was a fucking clown. Why? Because he had some mad idea of being black. Yeah, okay, the British Empire was shit. Everybody can acknowledge these facts. But it doesn't mean you should fuck over your own country in order to do some mad ideological fucking gymnastics on your economy. Because that's not right. It's complete bollocks. It's fucking retarded. People mix ideology with, like, how you should run a fucking functional country. It's the same way in Britain. People confuse being a xenophobe with being a conservative. They're not mutually fucking exclusive. A lot of people in the United Kingdom who vote Labour also used to vote for the BNP. Shock fucking horror when your population is mostly fucking white. It's not rocket science, you fucking idiots at this point. Anyway, I'm diverging into one of my stream rants, and I've got can't be asked to fucking honest with you. Anyway, shall we get to politics now? Because that is the main point at the top. I just wanted to show that because it's funny. Anyway, I love her. She's funny. Better than because it called says anyway. Anyway, shall we get to the actual point? Politics now. Here we go. I will now shut up for now.
Is the Home Secretary right on asylum? Will drug consumption rooms cut deaths? And the future of HS2? Why can't Rishi Sunak say yes or no? This is Politics Live. Joining me, Transport Minister Richard Holden, Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle, Reem Ibrahim of the Free Market think tank, the IEA, and Dr Parth Patel of the centre-left think tank, the IPPR. Today, Rishi Sunak refuses to answer questions on the future of HS2.
I'm not speculating on future things. We've got spades in the ground right now and we're getting on. But what people also want to know... government is always making sure that we get value for money out of everything we do.
Building work has already started, but will this high-speed rail line ever reach Manchester?
Winchester College has a rowing club, a rifle club, an extensive art collection. They charge over £45,000 a year in fees.
Keir Starmer likes to talk about private schools, but why has Labour's policy changed?
So this is an injection area of the Enhanced Drug Treatment Service.
The UK's first drug consumption room is given the go-ahead in Glasgow. Will it solve Scotland's drugs crisis?
People do game the system. They come to the UK, they purport to be homosexual in the effort to game our system, in the effort to get special treatment.
That's what the Home Secretary said about the asylum system. Is she right? So, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been talking to local BBC radio stations across the country all morning. I think he's done about 18 interviews or so. When asked whether HS2 would be going all the way to Manchester, this is what he had to say.
Now, like I said, I'm not speculating on future things. We've got spades in the ground right now and we're getting on. But what people also want to know... government is always making sure that we get value for money out of everything we do, but that's just a statement of the obvious, right? But I think what people also should know, because I know there's a lot of focus on this one thing, but actually, what are the journeys that people use most in Greater Manchester or across the north? It's in their cars right now, getting to work, taking their kids to school, making sure that the roads are free of potholes. That's probably priority number one that people raise with me.
Well, that's my opening question. Potholes or HS2? What's your number one priority, Richard?
Well, as the Roads and Local Transport Minister,
Yeah.
you'd obviously expect me to focus on the bus announcement we've made today, but we're £80 million extra to protect bus services across the country,
Yeah, but my question,
and also the road network.
What's your number one priority, potholes or HS2? It seems it's potholes for Rishi Sunak.
I think the truth is across the transport systems interact with each other, and right across the board we need to make sure that there's cash going everywhere. As the Prime Minister said, we're already underway with stage 1 of HS2. There are already thousands of people working on that project. I think in the but we have also seen, particularly due to the war in Ukraine, massive increase in costs of in inflation. People have seen it at the supermarkets, probably about twice that in terms of construction projects, and that goes for roads.
Sure.
Well, I'll come back. Also having to look at as well.
But Rishi Sunak raised the sort of choice, if you like, or the number one priority for people he speaks to, and that's potholes. Potholes or HS2? What do people care about most?
Well, potholes are local council responsibility, and at local council elections, I can tell you that does come up high up. But people are relatively politically astute, I think, and they know that the national government is meant to be investing in big infrastructure projects, meant to be doing these things to improve, boost our economy, to allow Britain to grow, to allow us to rebalance the north-south divide. And the reality is, what's happened is HS2 costs have spiralled because the Tories have bought into a NIMBYs charter. In France, it's about it's a tenth less than the cost of building high-speed rail because they just don't tunnel. They say, I'm sorry, if you want to tunnel under your lovely green hills, it costs more money, you will have to pay locally. What we've done here is nice Tory shires of the Chiltern Hills. We've tunnelled underneath, increasing the cost, and then we're not even going to be able to get to the places where it should have advantaged.
HS2 would be the priority?
Yes, we have advantaged the NIMBYs in Conservative Central, and we've not actually benefited any of the northern cities.
Well, it's clear, of course, no decisions yet been taken, and with the Conservatives about to go to Manchester for their annual conference, over which the speculation is focused on HS2, will it extend to Manchester? Which is the top priority for government, potholes or HS2?
Well, potholes, as Lloyd said, are not the responsibility of national government. So when we're thinking about the way that we're spending taxpayer money, we need to be thinking about where that's actually being focused. It is rather ironic that, of course, they were going to Conservative Party conference in Manchester, and yet this is a huge astronomical cost of HS2, which has effectively failed to reach Manchester. What I would like to see is the government to actually restrain the amount, look at fiscal responsibility and actually restrain the amount that they're spending on these kind of huge infrastructure projects.
Right, can we not do these big projects, these grandiose projects? Maybe we should just focus on potholes.
No, that's not right. People don't differentiate types of government. Local government does potholes and national government does rail. No. The point is these are both transport policies, but for completely different purposes, right? Potholes are important. Driving or cycling over a pothole is a horrible sensation, but HS2 is an opportunity to transform this country's economy. We have one of the most regionally unequal economies in the rich world. We have the lowest growth in the rich world. HS2 is the infrastructure to build tomorrow's economy on. That is a different question to potholes.
Right, Richard, why can't the Prime Minister just say yes or no? Have you been in these meetings with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor talking about whether HS2 should go ahead to Manchester?
I haven't personally, no. But can I just come back to one other thing on this sort of debate around potholes?
Yeah, but why can't he just say yes or no on the question of HS2? It's now being discussed extensively, and it is a big issue, whichever side of this question you stand. Why can't he just answer it?
I mean, the answer to that is quite clear. They're currently, obviously, looking into the details of it, given the huge inflationary pressures. I just wanted to come back on one potholes thing. I also, yes, a lot of roads are local roads, but there are also some strategic national roads which come under my department as well. A lot of that infrastructure, for example, is from the 60s and 70s. A lot of it's coming to the end of its natural life. Concrete roads in the east of England particularly is a good example. Yeah. We are having to put £7 billion in through national government for the national road network as well in terms of repairs and renewals. So there is a huge amount. You know, potholes might be seen as a sort of local thing, but actually this is actually as important when you're talking about economic growth across the country and the road network is vitally important for that.
Surely you acknowledge if you don't finish the project, so if you don't bring it to Euston and if you don't take it to Manchester, you have wasted billions of pounds on a railway that is then slower than the conventional railway to get to Birmingham because it's stopping in the wrong place in London and doesn't provide any of the economic benefit. So we've got so far down. Sometimes you get so far in a project, you say, I have to finish it. Otherwise, actually, I will have wasted far more in the long run. And why can't the government just do that? I mean, that's what we're hearing from the Treasury. That's what we're hearing from the economists.
I agree with that.
Instead, they seem to be now timid. And the danger is contractors will start looking elsewhere to deploy
Well, let
their
Richard answer, and then we'll move on.
Actually, you need to look at the different elements of the HS2 project in their individual benefit cost ratios, and I'm sure that's exactly what the government's going to be doing. And the connectivity there is in lots of different ways. For example, at Old Oak Common, you're looking at 1,400 acres of brownfield redevelopment in a really quite poor part of London,
taking longer which is going to be rail.
Just before we move on, your colleague Dehenna Davison on Woman's Hour has said that she had never backed HS2 and thinks Rishi Sunak should be able to say if he's going ahead with it or not. Do you agree with her?
Well, I'm sure we will find out in the coming days exactly what's going to occur.
Well, as we've said,
as has been said, this is all part of looking towards the autumn statement as we're looking towards major decisions.
But will we get a decision? But will we get a decision
in the north? You should have started in the north, like Labour proposed originally.
But will we get a decision in the coming days? Then we'll get it at Tory Party conference.
As I've said, this is all looking at kicking all the tyres on all the spending commitments ahead of the autumn statement. Which is exactly what the government should be doing.
The good news is Politics Live is also going to be at the Conservative Party conference to hear that announcement that Richard Holden implies could be while we're there. There's the crowded timetable, as you can see, but we're on every day, Monday to Thursday, as usual. But we have a special programme for the Chancellor's speech on Monday and an extended programme on Wednesday for Rishi Sunak's conference speech. Maybe he'll talk about HS2 in that speech. Let's talk about Labour. This is the headline. Labour U-turns on plans to end private schools' charitable status, but will still impose 20% VAT charge. The VAT charge is going to be brought in within 100 days of a Labour government. Is this a U-turn when it comes to dropping the charitable status?
Well, I think the focus was about trying to make sure private schools didn't have a benefit from my local FE college. My local FE college pays business rates, it pays VAT. And so it seems wrong to me that my local FE, state-funded, providing technical skills, is having to pay taxes, and the local private school, Rodine or Brighton College,
So why are you ending the charitable status of private schools, as you said?
So the focus is not about the status of them. The focus is them having to pay the tax. And I think that what the calculation is much quicker, it's much easier just to charge them the tax and say, be whatever status you want, but your status will not exempt you anymore from these taxes. And the real reason that a lot of them had these statuses was for the tax benefit. You take the tax benefit away and then you say, OK, well, we're neutral on the status. We don't care whether you're an academy, whether you're private, whether you're charitable, because not all private schools are charitable.
No, they're not all.
And so we just say all educational institutions that are outside of the state need to pay tax and need to be fair.
Well, there you go. No change.
Well, it's quite clear. It's just another U-turn from Starmer. He's been all over the place on immigration, all over the place on the EU, and he's all over the world and all over the place at the same time.
The global leader, that's called.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that. I think leadership requires you to make a decision and really stick to it. And it's quite clear that when it comes to immigration, for example, or EU membership, or open door borders, Keir Starmer's absolutely all over the place. It's like watching some of those lads at my local Big Tesco car park doing donuts in the evening. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yes, and the Conservative Party that's got through 4 Prime Ministers in the last few years is hardly the most reliable.
Well, in 8 positions on HS2 in the last week. I mean, come on, guys. When we look at what Labour are up to at the moment, it's quite clear that none of their policies really stand scrutiny.
All right. Well,
when it comes to, for example, education, right? The government has been concentrating all of its efforts on getting more kids to good or outstanding schools. That's gone up from around 2/3 in 2010 to over 85% now.
Well, yes, we've seen the disastrous school buildings. We've seen the failure to invest. I mean, under Labour's plans, when we were last in, every school would have been rebuilt in this country by now. The Conservatives scrapped that, and now we have children in danger. That's the Conservative legacy. democracy. Letting down our children,
don't talk over
crumbling
each
our
other.
schools.
It's untrue.
It's not untrue, it's the facts.
Well, let me finish. The Building Schools for the Future programme was totally unfunded. When it where they were funded,
half of them were rebuilt
where
under
they were
Labour.
funded.
The other half,
guys, don't talk over each other. Richard, don't shout.
Schemes,
Not
which
entirely.
cost hundreds of pounds to change
All
the
right.
light bulb. And so many local education authorities had to bail out their local schools because of the mess Labour left
All
behind.
right, well, on this, I mean, is there a change here? Is there a big change? Or substantively, is Labour sticking, well, it is sticking to its, or ending the tax reliefs for private schools?
There is a change there, absolutely, yes. Look, I welcome the fact that they've stuck to closing these tax loopholes, but there is a change in deciding whether to go after the charitable status of private schools or not. That is, I think, quite significant. Now, most people would agree that the provision of education can be seen as a charitable act. Absolutely. The problem here is that we're talking about the provision of education to the 7% of the richest kids in the country. Is that a form of charity or not? I think that is a debate worth having. But the thing with this, and as we just saw about this partisan sort of debate between the Labour and Tory MP opposite me, is that the people who are losing here are kids, right? The most interesting thing about Starmer's interview with Nick Robinson was that he said he wants state school children to have exactly the same life chances as kids who go to private school. That is a massive, massive ambition. It's not about a moral crusade against private schools. It's about bringing up state schools. Now, we can funnel this money from taxing private schools into state schools, but it's going to require a whole much bigger rethink of our education system here if we're going to level up chances for children in this country.
And I do think that, you know, a wider rethink of our current education system is really the right way forward here. But ultimately, when you're attacking the charitable status of these particular private schools, it's not just the top 1% of children that are going to be affected by this. There are thousands of families across the country that really do scrimp and save in order to invest in their child's education. There are many children that are unable to afford that kind of education as well. So really it's about, you know, if we want to improve education in this country, we should not be attacking private schools. We should be improving the quality of education in our state schools.
Well, let's just show this tweet from Momentum. This was the grassroots group set up to support the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. They're not very impressed for a different reason. This isn't just one more Starmer pledge junked onto the scrap heap. It's another capitulation to elite interests. It's simply indefensible that these engines of inequality would continue to benefit from capital gains and corporation tax relief under a Labour government. What would you say to them, Lloyd?
Well, I think that what I understand is that we are going to shut down the tax loopholes, but we are not going to focus on trying to change the status of schools at this moment, but instead have that wider discussion around how education is improved. If they're suggesting that those tax loopholes will not be able to be
different. They're talking about different tax loopholes
to be covered. I think that a sensible policy is about trying to make sure that those schools have to operate on an equal terms with other schools, and that we then improve all schools in our settings, rather than obsessing over whether they're a charity or not a charity, because actually I don't think most people care about that. What they care about is that they're on an equal playing field and their children in state schools get the opportunities to university, to jobs, to future life that everyone wants.
Let's talk about this headline in BBC News. UK's first consumption room for illegal drugs given the go-ahead. Yes, there will be rooms created in Glasgow. It's been approved by local authorities in Glasgow, backed by the Scottish Government as a way of tackling the country's drugs deaths crisis. Scotland has the highest number of drug-related deaths in Europe. We're going to talk to the SNP MP Alison Thewlis in just a moment, but first of all, let's hear from one drug user in Glasgow, Hugh, who talks about his daily experience of taking cocaine.
And see if there's all the sort of paraphernalia here, bits and bobs lying about. So watch your feet, there'll be needles and that lying about. This place is normal.
It's normal?
This is normal. This is a clean bit compared to a lot of other places. I would cut down a terrible amount of deaths. As you come down here, that's a sin bin there. That's for the needles and exchanges, needle drop box, I'll show you. So all you put your sharps in here, put your containers in, put it down, it's netted at the right. I'll show you this bit, it's not really, people sort of just don't appreciate it. You get some places that's covered it's the exact same as this all the way through Glasgow, all the way around.
Well, you can see a snapshot there of the reality if you're a drug user there in Glasgow. Alison Thewlis is with us now. Alison, as you know, the government at Westminster, the Home Office, does not back your plan or the local authorities in Glasgow's plan to have these drug consumption rooms for illegal drugs. The Home Secretary says, to be clear, this government will not be changing our policy on personal use of illegal drugs. I'm very clear. Illegal drugs destroy lives and communities. They are devastating. Why are you doing it?
Doing that particularly because, as Hugh there was describing, at the moment people are taking drugs in Glasgow. They are taking drugs in back lanes, in bin sheds, in people's common closes. And that's harmful for those people taking drugs in an unsafe way, and it's harmful for the communities that have to live with those people taking drugs on their doorsteps. I have constituents who open their door in the morning and don't know what they're going to find. So by taking this off the streets and into a medical facility where the people taking drugs can be supported and get access to a full range of support to help them deal with their addiction, yes, this will be a huge intervention, and it's been proven to work in 100 cities around the world that already use drug consumption rooms. I
mean, it's very clear that it would, to some extent, clear up the streets and the alleyways in Glasgow. What's the firm evidence? You say you've got international currency. What's the firm evidence it would actually cut the number of deaths if people are still taking these harmful, illegal drugs, but, yes, perhaps more safely?
Because it will take people into contact with a service, because at the moment, many of the people that are taking drugs in this chaotic way are not in any kind of support service. This takes them into this service, it gives them support, and there will be medical support on hand, nursing support within this facility as well. And across the world where these facilities have operated, there has not been a single death in an overdose prevention room anywhere in the world. Yes. And if you compare that to the drugs deaths that happen on the streets in these lonely places where people are not supported, that has the potential to have a significant impact in Glasgow. All right. What's also available here is a reduction in the harm that people cause themselves in injecting in very, very dirty and unclean ways. Yes. This will bring them to a facility where they actually have access to clean running water, and that will be, again, like this.
Well, we can see pictures of the drug consumption rooms and how they would be used. Richard Holden, what's the objection from the government to a policy that could very well save a lot of people's lives?
Look, I think you only need to see people like Hugh giving interviews to realise that there's a real issue here on the ground, particularly in Scotland, where there's a real opioid problem.
No, we said that, but why are you blocking? Well, you're not blocking it because it's actually going ahead, but why do you object to the idea and the policy?
Well, I think in England the rule is basically that you can have drug treatment in these outpatient facilities with things like methadone and things like that, but you can't take illegal drugs in them.
Why not?
Because the real concern is there from the Home Office and from the police that this will not actually try and reduce the drug problem, but normalises it, and I think that's the concern.
Well, I'm just going to get Alison to respond. I mean, that is a concern, a legitimate concern, isn't it, Alison?
I mean, what it is a purely ideological approach to this issue. It's treating it as a criminal justice issue, not a public health issue. And the recently published report by the Home Affairs Select Committee has said that we should treat drugs and treat addiction as a public health issue, because at the moment, the Misuse of Drugs Act, which is a very old and outdated piece of legislation, prevents people from getting the help that they need. So in such a facility, where at the moment there might be provision of clean syringes, people are handing out those clean syringes to people who are then going around the corner into the bin shed to inject. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and people should be inside and looked after in a medical facility, not outside on the street.
I mean, Lloyd, Labour in Scotland are supporting these drug consumption rooms. Would a Labour government at Westminster do the same?
Well, I think what we need to see is this trial in Scotland. I'm very supportive of it, and I do think that we have got ourselves into a real muddle with the Misuse of Drugs Act that criminalises the users but doesn't really help them become clean. It doesn't really target enough on gangs and criminals that are peddling this, and it too often easily, particularly in heroin, allows gangs to effectively kill people on the streets. If they suspect someone is about to dob them in, they give them a lethal dose of heroin and they are dead and off. There's lots of reports of that on our streets year in, year out. So the idea that you can go and deal with these things safely and you can be given the treatment is, I think, something that needs to be trialled. I'm really pleased that it is going to be in Scotland. I want to see that coming with the evidence that it's worked in England, and I know when I go to my estates and there are needles down alleyways, the people do not say, please just move these people on. What they actually say to me is, please treat them, please help them. We know that they're ill and sick, but all you do is send the police around and they go to another alleyway. So even the public, I think, knows the current system is not working.
Would it cut the number of deaths from taking these sorts of drugs?
Yeah, put simply, yes, it would. I completely agree with what Lloyd has said. I mean, I've spent lots of my time working in an accident and emergency department. I've spoken to lots of people with substance abuse disorders. And what they really want to do is to come off the substance abuse. The addiction really chemically rewires your brain, and you need support to do that, right? Scotland is not the first country to have rolled out one of these overdose prevention clinics. It's about 15, 16 countries around the world now, and they do work. They reduce deaths, definitely. They also reduce infections like HIV, and they help people come off drugs. I remember in the 80s, for example, the HIV epidemic, the Clean Needle programme had just started. At the time, it was met with such controversy. How dare we hand out clean needles to try and to help to people who are taking drugs? What did it do? It massively brought down HIV transmission rates. This will have a similar effect on drug death.
What about normalising it?
I think this is a particular... I mean, I think Alison's actually right here. It becomes an ideological question. We're talking about normalising drug consumption. These drug consumption rooms, I think, are fantastic, and really what they will do is, A, reduce deaths, but B, reduce end the war on drugs. And I think that when we're thinking about the war on drugs in its entirety, we need to actually think about more fundamental legislative reform. And I actually have no problem with decriminalising many of these currently illegal drugs, because ultimately it means that those users are being treated as patients, they're being treated as those that are sick, and I think everybody who's watching the programme at the moment, their heart will break to see these people in this way. Ultimately, we shouldn't treat them like criminals, we should treat them as though they are patients.
Richard, well, let me get Richard.
Along that line.
Well, Portugal is one of the examples that's used. Of course, they're not exactly the same as here, but it is one of the examples.
Decriminalisation point I meant here.
Oh, I see, on decriminalisation. Richard, what do you say in response to what you've heard from both Parth and Reem?
Look, I've been to some of these drug treatment centres near my own constituency in Durham, and it's quite clear that we've got to do more in this space. One of the biggest issues is actually, I found, was around tackling homelessness, because you ended up with multiple people living in the same place, and therefore, even if somebody is under treatment and is trying to get better, they're then in with people who aren't. And so I think this isn't about one thing, which is going to be a magic bullet. I think it's about a number of things. But I am, as I said, concerned about the normalisation of drug use, which this...
That's an ideological point, isn't it? Because ultimately it's this kind of, conservative, innate ideological point where people say they don't want to see the government allowing individuals to choose the way they live their lives, but also to actually receive this kind of treatment. And I really do think we need to
I think we just need to be a
that.
bit careful about allowing people to know these people have clearly got severe drug addiction problems. This isn't a lifestyle choice. I think we want to be suggesting to people, and I think I think we just need to be very cautious about that.
I don't think going to a medical facility where you have, kind of behind, as you saw there, behind screens, etc. I don't think that's suddenly glorifying taking of the drug. I think what it is saying is you have a medical problem, we need to medically support you, just like with other medical addictions, and we're going to do that in a professional way rather than at the moment where actually we push people into the hands of gangs who are violent and dangerous and actually sell stuff that leads into crime, violent crime and dangerous crime for communities.
Look, there's a difference. In England, what you can do is you can go to a drug treatment centre and get something like methadone in a drug treatment centre and take it there. This is different.
But it's extremely hard to get into those.
Listen, finish.
Wait a second, Lloyd.
Yeah.
This is different because what you're saying is you can take illegal drugs into somewhere and take them there. I'm innately uncomfortable with that element.
But the goal of this policy is to reduce deaths.
And
harm reduction.
I understand that. And
service.
so is the goal of the UK government's policy at the moment, which is you can have methadone and other substitutes.
Well, hang on. Let me go back to Alison. Because Alison, you said it was ideological, the Conservative opposition to it. But you've also said that in order to reduce the number of drug-related deaths and benefit communities, you need the full powers of independence. What would that do to cut the number of drug-related deaths? I don't know if Alison... can you still hear me? She's frozen. I think we'll leave her just at that point. Lloyd, do you accept that actually independence has nothing to do with this particular issue?
Well, they're having to get around it by just saying that they won't prosecute people even though it is still illegal. If they had independence, they would have some more ability to do it, but I actually don't think this is an independence issue, because this is an issue about getting drugs policy right for people all over the UK, and I'm afraid the government's going in the wrong direction.
Well,
for many years, we have had a policy at festivals to allow our young people to test their drugs to make sure they're not cut with rat poison and other things that will kill them. Because the reality is a lot of recreational drugs like MDMA don't kill people unless they're cut with really awful stuff. This year, the Home Office blocked all of our festivals from doing that safe testing. So this is not just about moving to a situation where the government is saying we don't want to promote it. What they're now doing actually is shutting down the current system of routes of safe.
Well, we've covered this precise
and
issue.
Allowing our young people
is
to be pushed.
Is that a retrograde? Was that a retrograde step?
I think the general government position is that there is not a safe way to take heroin because of the fact that you can overdose on it so quickly and can kill you. This is a reason it's illegal in the first place. I really don't think it's
isn't that the point? The point is that in these drug consumption rooms you can overdose, and that's why in these drug consumption rooms you have medical professionals that are able to prevent that from happening.
But surely the long term, the best thing to do is get these people off these drugs by initially
That's just not recognising the reality of the situation.
Starting with substitutes like methadone.
People are going to be taking
move people into that direction.
That chap was injecting cocaine, and so methadone, and the current systems that we have will not help him. And the only way that we can help him is bringing him into rooms, drug consumption rooms, working with him in psychological support and with some substance replacement support. But actually, substance replacement support is, as you've said, is not the key here. That holistic support around a person is what is really needed, and that's what these rooms do.
It is just worth saying that engagement with addiction services is much higher on people who do go to drug consumption rooms in other countries.
But politically, there just doesn't seem to be the appetite, does there, at a national level? I know Lloyd is saying he would personally be in favour of it, either from the Conservatives or the Labour Party.
Because our politicians have difficulty separating substance dependence as a health issue versus it as a criminal issue. Now, this health intervention service is not condoning the illicit trade of drugs. That is a different issue that requires attention. And we need to separate these issues so we don't dehumanise people who live into their 30s and 40s and have miserable lives versus the trade of drugs.
Right, let me just try, Alison. I think you can hear me, and we can hopefully hear, we can certainly see you. The constitutional question, because you have said you need the full powers of independence to really tackle this issue, but you don't, do you? There are lots of things you could have done, and now you've got the drug consumption rooms too, and still Scotland has the highest number of drug-related deaths in Europe.
Yeah, and I don't shy away, and none of my colleagues in the Scottish Government shy away from the scale of this issue that we have to tackle here. And we are doing a range of other things. And again, if you look at the Home Affairs Select Committee report, it commends the Scottish Government on the way in which we've rolled out the naloxone programme in Scotland, which is a life-saving treatment if somebody has an overdose, that can be administered, and that's being carried now by police in Scotland, by the ambulance service in Scotland, and by members of the public. I have a kit myself, should I come across anybody, and have been trained in how to use it. They've also credited the medication-assisted treatment standards in Scotland, which again means a same-day service if people want to get into
But it's not about having independence, is it?
Those things are... It's not, but this initial proposal was brought in 2016 by the Health and Social Care Partnership in Glasgow, and we are now in 2023.
All right.
If you think about the number of lives that could have been saved had that intervention gone ahead all those years ago, 7 years ago now, then that would have made a huge difference. Instead, we've had to wait for a new Lord Advocate to take a slightly different position on allowing this to go ahead, and that's not acceptable.
Alison Thewlis, SNP MP, thank you for joining us for that discussion, and apologies for the sound quality and the fact that we lost Alison at one point. We talked about the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, in the headlines in relation to asylum. Last night, speaking on ITV's Peston, the Home Secretary claimed refugees, some of them, lied about their sexuality to game the system. Let's take a listen.
What we see operationally is that people do game the system. They come to the UK, they purport to be homosexual in the effort to game our system, in the effort to get special treatment. That's not fair, and it's not right.
Really homosexual in those cases?
I'm afraid we do see many instances where people purport to be gay when they're not actually gay, but in order to get special treatment.
Are her comments fair, Richard?
It's quite clear that people do game the system when they try and get into the UK. They'll apply under one reason, and then down the line they'll try and choose other reasons. And it basically, this is one of the reasons we have such difficulty getting people deported, because the legal battles go on and on and on as people try and claim different rights.
Can you give us a sense of the scale of this particular problem, people purporting to be gay?
I think the broader point the Home Secretary, the broader point the Home Secretary is making is the broader point the Home Secretary is making was that people will claim under one thing, then they'll claim under various.
Well, no, she was very clear. She was very clear. She said people lie about their, broadly, sexuality, or they purport to be homosexual in order to further their claim. According to BBC Verify, only 1.5% of the asylum claims made last year had sexual orientation as part of the claim. So it's a very small number. How do you know those claimants aren't genuine?
Even within that context, you'd still be seeing hundreds of people. I would just also say, we also know of other things. For example, and this is probably a much more common one, when people are claiming to be younger than the age of 18 when they're actually over the age of 18. That's something that happens very regularly, and it's very, very difficult for the state to try and manage and deal with.
But we're talking about her most recent comments, and
I think she's pointing to the fact that people do try and claim all sorts of different things in order to bypass our normal immigration rules.
Let's talk more broadly about the issue. I know it is a very pertinent issue. MPs across the House say that they receive an awful lot of post about it. There is something about fairness, isn't there, Lloyd? There is something about people coming to claim asylum and they are economic migrants, and, you know, who can blame them if they're coming from parts of the world where they are struggling or facing persecution. But fairness does have to be at the heart of the system, otherwise people won't believe in it.
Yes, and we still have many countries in this world that put to death people because they are gay. Uganda, a Commonwealth country, has just gone further to criminalise and allow the death sentence to be reintroduced for homosexuality. So I think the idea that the Home Secretary is choosing this example, as Richard puts it, I think she's chosen it very deliberately, is clearly to try and divide and rule. It's particularly nasty and pernicious. Actually, far more people come claiming religious persecution, which is probably just as easy to fraudulently claim, as she would say, than being homosexual. And there have been cases of mass churches fraudulently dealing with that. But she doesn't raise that issue. Instead, she chooses to raise a minority that she thinks she can kick on, because that's what she likes doing. She likes kicking minorities. She likes kicking refugees. She likes kicking gay people. She likes kicking drug users, not allowing them to. She likes kicking people who are down, and she thinks she can get away with it. Well, and I'm afraid she's a nasty piece of work, and that is just one example of it.
Is she a nasty piece of work that kicks minorities?
Well, she clearly is.
I don't think that's fair. I think she's drawing attention to what I've said is a broader issue. And as Lloyd says, there are other things in which people try and bypass our normal immigration system and make things up, and then we'll keep claiming and keep claiming.
We have very few,
which is why we've got to crack down on it.
We have very few asylum seekers compared to many of our European colleagues and nations.
Some of our European colleagues.
And of course, what we have to remember is, at the moment, there are no legal routes to come to Britain. So the only way to come to Britain...
There are legal routes.
To come to Britain as a refugee.
Right, well, there are legal routes, as we know.
There is no legal route to come to Britain as a refugee. If you come from Ukraine, you're not a refugee, you're classed in a different category. There is no legal route to come to Britain as a refugee. And the problem with that is that it pushes people into the hands of the very worst people smugglers.
Sure.
And then, of course...
The people coming...
they are desperate.
The people coming are... by and large, you can see it.
By and large, they're refugees. Their claims
let Richard
from the number of people crossing and the type of people crossing, you can see.
And the vast majority of them are refugees.
A vast majority are young men coming to the UK, and they're basically coming, as the Home Secretary outlined in a speech in Washington a couple of days ago, because of economic migration reasons.
Can young men not be refugees?
Can I just say that is simply not true. This is a debate in which people seem to deploy evidence to marshal a particular moral point of view, and therefore it's really difficult to discuss this claim that we've just seen Suella Braverman make. Actually, 1.5% of asylum applicants are claiming are on grounds of sexuality, of which most are granted. They go through a process, and someone on the other end, a British person, is saying, actually, yes, that is a fair claim. They're coming from countries overwhelmingly where it is illegal to be gay, where they are legitimate in their fear of persecution. I think these are all really fair points. The really concerning thing here is, and I don't know the Home Secretary, but the normalisation of these lies, this politics of fear, that is really troubling for a democracy. We're seeing her attack courts.
Well, and we'll come on to the courts. But on Parth's point, are you completely comfortable with everything Suella Braverman has said over the last few days about asylum and about refugees?
Her speech in Washington was very clear, and I think is actually...
It was clear, but do you support? Are you comfortable?
And outlined exactly the issues that we're facing. People, the entire system has changed.
But ultimately, it's a failure of the Home Office, right? I mean, we've seen the asylum backlog go up from 100,000 to 170,000.
But is she right, though, that it is an existential crisis facing countries in terms of broadly migration, people moving across the globe?
I think it's absolutely a problem where I do believe there are people that would try to gain the system. Ultimately, the solution is that we introduce these safe and legal routes. There are people that would like to come to this country for economic reasons that would, of course, game the system.
And they have safe and legal routes to do that.
They, unfortunately...
No.
For a small number of Afghanistani people and for Ukrainians...
Economic migrants. You're talking hundreds of thousands of people coming a year as economic migrants through legal routes to the UK. These other people are trying to bypass that.
But the majority of them are refugees because they are granted refugee status.
Lloyd, there are significant numbers coming from Ukraine, from Hong Kong, Afghanistan and Syria.
Well, they're not significant numbers from Afghanistan,
not anymore, but varying degree. Where would you open those safe and legal routes? How many would you have? Would you have them in all the countries that migrants come from or people claiming asylum come from? So it could be Eritrea, it could be Iran, it could be Ethiopia, it could be Uganda. Would you have them everywhere?
Well, I think, first of all, you set up a safe and legal route application in France where people are to stop people coming over on the most dangerous route. That's where you start it. And if then there is still problems, then you
get asylum from France, though, do they?
No, well, if you speak English and if you have family,
country.
if you look, if Britain,
why do we want to take
if Britain suddenly became unsafe for me, which, to tell you the truth, sometimes I feel like there's a danger slipping into with this government. I do. If Britain became an unsafe country for me,
why do you feel unsafe?
Would I go because of some of the nasty policies that we've seen from Suella? If Britain became an unsafe country for me, where would I go? Would I go to France or Spain or Italy, our neighbouring countries, or would I probably try and get to Australia or America, where my mum grew up, or I would try and go to places where there are links, because I know that I can be a productive person in that country moving forward. That's why people choose Britain, and it's not the majority of refugees around the world.
Well, let's just have a look, because the government has also made, obviously, claims to the courts over wanting to deport or outsource asylum seekers to Rwanda. We're waiting on that ruling. The hearing's going to start on the 9th of October and we will hear in November. If the Rwanda's decision doesn't go the government's way, Richard, should the UK leave the European Court?
Well, let's wait and see what happens with the Rwanda decision, because the Rwanda decision is being done. Just wait a second. Is being done under the ECHR process. I think the government thinks it's compatible with it. I think it's compatible with it, and so that is a way where we don't need to leave the ECHR if the Rwanda scheme.
But we think
is
we should.
allowed.
Well, let me show you this in the Times. Number 10, the story. Number 10 backs threat by Suella Braverman to leave Human Rights Convention on the basis that perhaps it's turned down in terms of Rwanda being lawful. Do you agree?
Well, I think I'm confident that the government's position, which means that we can do the Rwanda scheme within the ECHR, will be allowed by the legal process.
I mean, is this, do you think, a threat and nothing more?
Yes, it is. I mean, this is the kind of thing that actually really terrifies me. What we're seeing here is, essentially, in a democracy, people with power will always abuse it. That's why we have the separation of powers. We have the government, parliament, and the courts. And what we're seeing here is the government really attack the courts to say, we don't like what you say, we're just going to ignore you. That is a form of democratic backsliding. It's not just undermining the rights of people seeking asylum in this country, it's undermining all of our civil liberties, and it could lead to a really quite dark place for this country.
But what this is saying is that effectively a lot of these powers are being given to a court that's not in the United Kingdom, but in Strasbourg. And I think that is a problem. And I don't necessarily agree with the Rwanda policy. I think it's a huge waste of money for what we're getting out of it.
But what about this idea of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights?
But I do think the ECHR is undoubtedly going to be blocking these kind of legislative moves by the government in the future. We're seeing this kind of move away from the ECHR in the first place, and actually I don't think it's right that a European court has any jurisdiction in this country.
I mean, the ECHR was set up post-war by Winston Churchill.
This is the European Convention on Human Rights, yes.
Convention, which had always the ability to have a court, and the court was then set up slightly afterwards. But the convention was set up by people like Winston Churchill in the ashes of the Second World War, on the understanding not only that actually Germany had done awful things, but also that in the war we had done awful things. We had turned back Jewish refugees in that process at the beginning of the war, and we looked back at ourselves and we said, actually, we need sometimes an outside check to say, hang on a second, you're not doing this right. We collectively came and decided that, and trying to withdraw us and smash Winston Churchill's legacy, which is what the Conservatives want to do, of course puts us in good stead with, of course, only Russia and Belarus, which were withdrawn from it. And Russia's now reapplying for the UN body.
I was on the Council of Europe as a Member of Parliament as well, so I'm fully aware of the history around it. What I would say is that you're looking at treaties here from right at the end of the Second World War. You know, when even my grandparents, who are all now dead, none of them could have voted in elections at that point of time. So you're looking at something from a totally different era. I think there is definitely a case, you know, for proper reform of some of these systems, whether it's a refugee convention or looking at the ECHR, but because it's quite clear that what was the right perhaps for Europe at the end of the Second World War is in a very different place today.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you to all of my guests. There'll be Politics UK tomorrow and Politics Live at the Conservative Party conference on Monday. Please join me there next week. Bye-bye.
Wait, hold on. I thought that shit was on the weekend. She said next week. Oh god, I'm fucking confused now. I've got no idea what's going on. Fucking party conference is fucking shite. Anywho, back later tonight in about, I don't know, an hour, give or take. I was gonna say politics fucking loud then. Question time. So yes, I will be back then. So enjoy your popcorn or whatever. Get your kettle ready. Back in about an hour, give or take. I think it's 24 to 20. It's about an hour anyway, give or take. Press the bell button if you're that way inclined. I fucking hate the bell. I hate the bell button. Always fucking notifies me. Can't stand it. Anywho, be back in about an hour.